The Secret of Excalibur by Andy McDermott. Narrated by Gildart Jackson. Copyright 2008 by Andy McDermott. This unabridged audiobook was published by arrangement with Bantam Dell, an imprint of the Random House Publishing Group, a division of Random House Incorporated, and was produced in the year 2011 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Prologue. Sicily. The little church watched over the village of San Maggiore as it had every sunset for 7 centuries. The dusty road up from the village was steep and winding, but the local faithful were proud enough of their place of worship and its long history not to complain about the trek, at least not too frequently. Father Lorenzo Cardella was the most proud of the church. He knew pride was technically a sin, but this place belonged to God, and surely even the Creator would allow himself a moment to appreciate it. Modest in appearance and size, it had for all that withstood weather and wars, invaders and insurgents, since the days of the Holy Roman Empire. God, the priest mused, clearly liked it enough to keep it around. He took a last moment to appreciate the splendor of the setting sun before turning to the church's time-scoured oak doors. He was about to lock them when he heard the slithering crunch of a vehicle coming around the road's final hairpin. A large black SUV pulled itself through the turn, tires scrabbling for traction, even with four-wheel drive. He suppressed a sigh. The truck, American, he guessed, from its sheer bulk and gaudy chrome, had a foreign registration plate. The idea that churches had opening hours just like any place of business always seemed to escape tourists who treated the world as their own personal amusement park. Well, this group would have to go away disappointed. The truck rumbled to a standstill. Father Cardella put on a polite face and waited for its occupants to emerge. The windows were tinted so darkly that he couldn't even tell how many people were inside. He held back another sigh. Who do they think they were? Hollywood stars? The doors opened. Definitely not Hollywood stars. While Father Cardella didn't want to be uncharitable, he couldn't help thinking it had been a long time since he'd seen such a concentration of ugliness. First out was the driver, a shaven-headed man with a sallow, almost sickly complexion. He had the look of a soldier, or a convict. From the other side emerged a giant, a mass of muscle unfolding himself with difficulty even from this oversized vehicle's interior. His wiry beard failed to camouflage a face pockmarked with scars, the biggest a gnarled knot of skin in the center of his forehead. Whatever injury he had sustained there, he had been lucky to survive it. The third person to exit was a woman, whom Father Cardella would have considered attractive, if not for her hard, scowling expression and lurid blue-dyed hair, which seemed to have been hacked short as if she had done it herself, using a knife, without the aid of a mirror. She quickly turned in a full circle, eyes scanning the surrounding landscape before locking onto him with an uncomfortable intensity. For a moment the three stood still, regarding him. Then the woman tapped twice on the SUV's window. The last occupant emerged. He was older than the others, close-cropped hair, grey, but he had the same hardness to him, an armour forged by the batterings of a brutal life. Somehow Father Cardella could tell this man was used to treating others as he had been treated himself. His nervousness increased as the man strode towards him, the others automatically falling in step like soldiers on the march. He backed up slightly, one hand reaching for the door-handle. Can I help you?" The leader's broad, almost frog-like mouth unexpectedly broke into a smile, though his piercing blue eyes remained as cold as ever. "Good evening. This is the Church of San Maggiore, yes?" His Italian was reasonably good, but he had a strong accent, Russian, the priest thought. "It is." "Good." The man nodded. "My name is Alexei Kruglov. We have come to see your—" He paused, frowning briefly as he struggled to find the right word. "Your reliquary," he finished. "I'm afraid the church is closed for the night," Father Cardella told him, still with one hand on the door-handle. "It will open again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I can show you around then, if you like." The humorless smile returned. "This is not convenient for us. We want to see it now." Masking his rising concern, Father Cardella opened the door and backed through it. "I'm sorry, but the church is closed, unless you want to make a confession," he added, the words coming out unbidden in a failed attempt at levity. To his horror, Kruglov's smile became genuine, a sadistic leer. "Sorry, Father, but even God would be shocked for everything I have to confess." His hand jabbed forward in a signal of action. Father Cardella threw the door shut, closing the bolt just as someone slammed against the wood. He leaned against the oak to hold it as he fought rising panic, trying to think. His mobile phone was in his small study at the back of the church. Help from the village could be here in minutes. Another blow to the door, so hard that Father Cardella was thrown to the ground as the bolt sheared in half. A gnarled, plate-sized hand reached around the edge to shove the door wider. He kicked as hard as he could. The door crashed shut, smashing the hand against the frame. A low gasp came from outside, an intake of breath. He waited for the scream of pain. It didn't come. Instead, he heard laughter. He scrambled upright, stumbling down the aisle. He looked back to see the huge man almost filling the doorway, bared teeth glinting in a demented smile. Outside, the woman yelled something in Russian. Father Cardella raced desperately for his study. "Get out of the way, bulldozer!" shouted the blue-haired woman. "And stop laughing, you retard!" "That felt good," growled the giant, ignoring her insult. He stepped back, examining his hand. A gash had been torn across its back, blood matting the thick hair covering it. "Ha! The old man kicks like a donkey." Kruglov clicked his fingers impatiently. "Dominika, Yosarin, get the priest." He gestured to the giant. "Maximov, come with me." The woman and the shaven-haired man nodded obediently and ran into the church. Maximov wiped the blood from the back of his hand with a final grunt of pleasure. "Where are we going, boss?" "The reliquary. If the Germans' research was right, what we want is in there." He gestured through the door. Maximov grunted again, this time in acknowledgment, and ducked inside. Kruglov followed. The priest had reached a door at the far end of the church and slammed it shut. Kruglov frowned. Either he meant to barricade himself inside until help arrived, or— "Dominika, if he gets outside, stop him," he called, new strategies instantly clicking into place inside his head. "Maximov, break the door down." Dominika turned and ran back the way she had come as Yosarin reached the other door. As Kruglov had expected, it was locked from inside. Maximov broke into a lumbering run down the aisle and barged into the wood shoulder first. It was far less sturdy than the oak at the church's entrance. The force of the impact ripped it clean off its hinges. Man and door ploughed into Father Cardella's desk, tipping it over and spilling its contents across the floor. Yosarin ran in after him, just in time to see the frightened priest scurry through another door at the rear of the study. "He's gone out the back," he warned Kruglov. "Go after him!" Yosarin took off, passing Maximov as he untangled himself from the wreckage of the desk. "You want me to go too, boss?" the big man asked. "No," said Kruglov. "Let's get what we came for." The phone was clutched tightly in his hand, but Father Cardella couldn't spare even the moment he needed to look down and punch in a number as he ran along the narrow path between the back of the church and the steep, rocky slope below. He heard a bang, the door being thrown open. They were coming after him. Who were they, and what did they want? The reliquary, the leader had said. They wanted something from the church's repository of relics. But why? The items there were significant only in regard to the church's history, not for their monetary value. At most they would be worth a few €1,000. Nothing worth coming all the way from Russia to steal. He emerged from behind the church, risking a glance back as the path widened. The shaven-headed man was running after him, fists and feet pumping almost robotically. At the top of the road he saw the black truck, the woman throwing open the rear door and pulling out a long, cylindrical case. That escape route was blocked then, but there was another, an old path winding steeply down through the woods to the village. Heart thudding, he headed for the gap between the scrubby bushes marking the start of the trail. It had been a few years since he'd last taken it, but he knew the route well, and unless the man chasing him had the agility of a goat, he too would find it tricky to negotiate. Father Cardella just needed him to be slowed for a few seconds, enough of a respite to use the phone. One call would bring the entire village to his aid. The people of San Maggiore wouldn't take kindly to strangers threatening their priest. He reached the bushes. The hillside opened out below him. Footsteps behind, getting closer. Father Cardella leapt over the edge, black robes flapping behind him like a cape. His foot thumped down among the rocks and roots. The path was a blur, only memory guiding him. Arms flailing, he fought to bring his descent under control. A shout from behind, a foreign curse followed by an explosive crackle of branches. Father Cardella didn't need to look back to know what had happened. His pursuer had slipped and tumbled into a bush. He had the few seconds he needed. Raising the phone, he stabbed at the keypad to bring up the directory. Anyone in the village would do. He selected a name, pushed another button. A message on the screen told him the phone was dialing. A few seconds to make a connection, another few to get an answer. He looked back up the slope as he held the phone to his ear. It was ringing. The bald Russian was still entangled in the bush. "Come on, pick up!" Another figure at the top of the hill, a silhouette against the sunset. The woman. A click in his ear, the phone being picked up. "Hello!" He opened his mouth to speak. The fat, cylindrical suppressor attached to the barrel of the rifle Dominica was holding reduced the sound of the gunshot to little more than a flat thump. It was so quiet that Father Cardella never even heard the shot that killed him. The reliquary was a cramped chamber behind the altar, low enough to force Krugloff to duck his head. He ignored the inconvenience as he hunted for his objective. The other items in the reliquary, carefully arranged on blood-red velvet inside a glass-topped case, were little more than junk. A very old Bible, the Latin text illuminated by hand rather than printed. A silver plate with a crude illustration of Jesus etched into the metal. A golden cup. The rest of the pieces didn't even merit more than a cursory glance. He knew what he was looking for. There it was. The last item, tucked away in a corner of the case as if even the priest considered it insignificant. It certainly looked it, just a shard of metal barely 10 centimeters long, the broken tip of a sword. A circular symbol was inscribed on it, a labyrinth marked with small dots. Apart from that, it appeared utterly unremarkable. But the sight of it made Krugloff smile his cold smile once more. He had to admit that he'd believed the German was either a fraud or deluded, spouting nonsense. But Vaskovich thought otherwise, and only a fool would dismiss his beliefs. He pointed at the case. Maximov, practically crouching to fit in the room, clenched his fist and banged it down on the glass. It shattered over the relics. The huge man's beard twitched with an involuntary smile, and Krugloff wasn't surprised to see a sliver of glass poking from his hand. He ignored it, long used to his subordinate's peculiarities. Instead, he reached past him into the case, carefully prodding the glass fragments aside until he could lift out the sword-piece. After everything Vaskovich had told him about it, he half expected something extraordinary to happen, but it was just metal, inert, cold. Maximov plucked the glass from his hand, then looked more closely at the golden cup. "Do we take the other things too?" he asked, already reaching for it. "Leave it!" snapped Krugloff. The scar on Maximov's forehead twisted with his look of disappointment. "But it's gold!" "You can buy better from any goldsmith in Moscow. This is all we came for." He took a slim, foam-lined metal case from inside his jacket, carefully placing the piece of sword inside. "That's it." Dominica peered into the reliquary. "I took care of the priest," she announced in a bored tone. Maximov's scarred forehead furrowed again. "You killed him?" She snorted sarcastically. "Duh." "But he was a priest," he protested. "You can't kill a priest." "Actually, it's easy." After rolling her eyes, she looked at the case in Krugloff's hand. "Did you get it?" "I got it. Let's go." Krugloff looked past her. "Where's your Sarin?" Another eye roll. "He fell in the bush." Krugloff shook his head, then slipped the case back into his pocket and ducked through the low door. "Start the fire over there," he decided, pointing at the first row of pews. "No need to make it look like an accident. The Sicilian Mafia will take the blame. It's their kind of thing." He strode up the aisle as Dominica sprayed lighter fluid over the pew, then lit a match and tossed it into the puddle of liquid. Flames instantly leapt up with a whoomp. The trio left the church, joining Yasarin and climbing back into their black SUV. As they drove down the winding road, the first curls of smoke drifted from the door of the little church, catching the last light of the dying sun as they rose. 1. Washington, D.C. 3 weeks later. "Nervous?" asked Eddie Chase, nudging his fiancée as they approached the door. Nina Wilde fingered the pendant around her neck, her good luck charm. Yeah, aren't you?" "Why? We've met the guy before." "Yeah, but he wasn't the frickin' president then, was he?" An aide opened the door and ushered them into the Oval Office. They were greeted by applause. Waiting for them were former U.S. Navy Admiral Hector Amoros, their current boss at the United Nations International Heritage Agency, several White House officials and representatives of Congress, the First Lady, and Victor Dalton, the President of the United States of America. "Dr. Wilde," he said, stepping forward to shake her hand, "and Mr. Chase. Good to see you both again." "Good to see you again, too. Mr. President," Nina added quickly. Chase shook hands next. "Thank you, sir." The others took their seats while Nina, Chase, and Dalton remained standing. Dalton waited for everyone to settle before speaking, half turning to face the White House photographer recording the event as much as his guests of honor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "distinguished members of Congress, members of my cabinet. It is truly a great privilege to present this award to a woman whose unflinching bravery in the face of extreme danger has saved countless lives both in America and elsewhere in the world. At the same time, a woman whose dedication to science and discovery has changed our view of history forever, restoring to the world long-lost treasures that until now were thought only to be a myth. In a way, she is responsible for protecting both our past and our future. I am honored today to introduce Dr. Nina Wilde, the discoverer of the lost city of Atlantis and the buried tomb of Hercules, and also the savior of this nation from a monstrous terrorist act, and to present her with the highest accolade this office can bestow, the Presidential Medal of Freedom." Nina blushed, simultaneously fighting the pedantic urge to correct Dalton. Atlantis was the name of the island, not the city, as he carefully took a medal attached to a blue ribbon from a velvet tray. "Dr. Wilde, this nation is in your debt. I would be honored if you would accept this symbol of our eternal gratitude." "Thank you, Mr. President," she said, lowering her head. Dalton raised the medal and placed it around her neck. He then shook her hand once more before turning her to face the strobing flashes of the camera, leaving her momentarily dazzled. The speech she had worked out earlier melted away to nothing under the onslaught of light and renewed applause. "Thank you," she repeated, struggling to come up with something intelligent to say. I'm very grateful for this award, this honor. And, I'd also like to thank my fiancé, Eddie." She cringed mentally at that. "I'd also like to thank. This isn't the goddamn Oscars. Without whom I'd probably be, well, dead. Several times over. Thank you, everyone." Cheeks now as red as her hair, she moved back. "Dr. Wilde stepped on my toes a little there," said Dalton jovially, raising a polite laugh and making Nina wish the Oval Office had a secret trap-door she could disappear down. "But, yes, the second person we're here to honor today is Eddie Chase." He gestured for Chase to step forward and take Nina's place, "who, as a former member of the United Kingdom's elite Special Air Service, has chosen to eschew public recognition for security reasons, which is a decision we can all respect. But this nation owes him a tremendous debt of gratitude for his role in preventing a terrorist atrocity. He shook Chase's hand. "Mr. Chase, on behalf of the people of the United States of America, I thank you." "Thank you," said Chase as the applause began again. When it became clear that he wasn't going to add anything else, the sound quickly died down. This time, only a single picture was taken. Unlike the photos of Nina, which would be attached to a press release and sent out to news agencies worldwide within the hour, this was solely for the White House's official records. Dalton's slight turn away from Chase acted as an unspoken signal that the formal part of the presentation was over, and the audience stood, the politicians quickly seizing the opportunity to approach the president. "So that was your big speech," Chase said quietly to Nina. "Thought it was going to be all about the wonder of great treasures from the past." Nina's face screwed up at the reminder. "Don't start! God, I was so nervous. You're lucky I managed anything more coherent than duh." Amoros stepped up to them. "Well, congratulations to both of you. Eddie, are you sure you don't want any kind of recognition? I'm certain something could have been arranged." "That's okay," said Chase firmly. "I've pissed off a lot of people over the years. Last thing I need is to remind them that I shot their scumbag brother or whatever by getting a medal." He looked down at Nina's neck. "Speaking of which, that suits you. You should wear it at the airport, see if it gets us a free upgrade to first class." Nina gave him a sarcastic smile. "You're still rushing off to England tonight?" Amoros asked. Chase nodded. "Wednesday, meet the President of the United States at the White House. Thursday, meet my nan for tea and biscuits in Bournemouth. Not quite in the same league." "We've been engaged for nearly a year," said Nina. "We thought it was time I met Eddie's family." "You thought it was time," Chase said pointedly. Nina held back a response as Dalton joined them, hangers-on moving into positions around them. "So, Dr. Wilde, you found Atlantis and the Tomb of Hercules. What's next on your agenda? Discovering the Temple of Solomon, or maybe Noah's Ark?" He finished the sentence with a small chuckle. Nina didn't laugh. "Actually, my current project for the IHA goes back much farther than anything I've done before Atlantis even. What I'm trying to do is to take advantage of the IHA's access to worldwide archaeological and anthropological data to track the spread of humanity around the world in prehistory." The words came out faster as her enthusiasm mounted. "The general pattern of the expansion of mankind out of Africa across Asia and Australia, and then later into the Americas and Europe, is pretty well established. The lowering of sea levels during ice ages allowed ancient humans to travel overland and settle in places that are now underwater. There's a very promising site in Indonesia that we're planning to explore later in the year." "I can't wait," said Chase. "It'll be great to finally get out of the office and see some action." "Careful what you wish for," Nina joked. "But my goal is to pinpoint the exact origin of humanity, the cradle of civilization, so to speak." Dalton raised an eyebrow. "Sounds to me like you're looking for the Garden of Eden." "You could say that, yes, although not in the Adam and Eve talking snake sense. Actually, finding the place where Homo sapiens branched off from other ancient hominids wouldn't make the creationists happy." She realized that Dalton had tensed slightly, and Amoros cleared his throat in a tone of soft but definite warning. "Oh, God! Sorry, they're part of your base, aren't they? Sorry." "That's okay," said Dalton, smiling thinly. "My base is broader than just the creationist wing, fortunately. Why, some of my supporters even believe the Earth revolves around the sun." He forced a laugh, his entourage joining him. After a moment, Nina followed suit in a mixture of embarrassment and relief. "It all sounds fascinating, Dr. Wilde. Although it'll be a tall order to top discovering Atlantis and the Tomb of Hercules, and both before you were 30. You turned 30 just recently, am I right?" "Yeah, I did," said Nina, not happy to be reminded of the fact. "Well, I'm sure you've still got time for plenty more accomplishments." Dalton laughed again, as did Nina, though this time it was her turn to force it. He was about to turn away when Chase spoke. "Excuse me, Mr. President, can I ask you something, sort of in private?" He tipped his head to indicate a spot a few feet away from the rest of the group. Dalton exchanged looks with his staff, then smiled and stepped over, the ever-present Secret Service agents watching from the side of the room. "Of course. What can I do for you, Mr. Chase?" "I wanted to ask you what's going on with Sophia." "You mean Sophia Blackwood?" Chase very nearly replied, "No, Sophia Loren," but managed to hold back the sarcastic retort. The former Lady Blackwood, the UK Parliament had recently stripped her of her title in absentia, was Chase's ex-wife, and also the mastermind behind the planned act of nuclear terrorism that he and Nina had just barely foiled. "Yeah. Last I heard, she'd been moved to Guantanamo Bay. When are you going to put her on trial?" "She was moved to Guantanamo for her own safety," Dalton answered. "If we put her in the normal prison system, she'd be dead long before we could hold a trial. It'd save all those lawyers' fees. We all know she's guilty, and you're going to have to execute her anyway, right?" Dalton gave him a cold smile. "I have faith in the justice system to do the right thing." "Glad to hear it." Chase extended his hand. "Thank you, Mr. President." "Thank you, Mr. Chase." The President shook the offered hand, then raised his voice. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to take care of a small difference of opinion with our Russian friends. The USS George Washington is already on station, but hopefully a second carrier group will help make our point." The muted laughter the comment provoked was very much of the dark kind. The ongoing disagreement between the West and Russia over the extension of the latter's territorial claims in the Arctic had taken an ominous turn just a few days earlier, when Russian warships forced an American survey vessel out of the disputed waters at gunpoint. "Dr. Wilde, Mr. Chase, and Hector," Dalton added, nodding to Amorose. "Thank you." With that, Nina, Chase, and Amorose left the Oval Office, a young aide escorting them through the White House corridors. "Thought that went okay," said Chase. "Well, my bits did anyway." Nina ground a fist into her forehead. "Oh, God, I can't believe I made an ass of myself in front of the President." "Twice in 2 minutes and all," Chase commented. "Not helping." "Don't worry about it, Nina," Amorose said reassuringly. "You did fine." Chase waved a thumb at the medal around her neck. "And you got a nice piece of bling out of it." "Eddie," Amorose chided, "the Presidential Medal of Freedom is not bling." Nina felt mildly affronted as well. "Yeah, come on, Eddie. I wouldn't make fun of you if you got a medal from the Queen." "Who says I haven't?" Chase replied. Nina regarded him suspiciously. Even after having known him for over 2 years, she still wasn't quite able to tell whether he was being serious or, as he called it on the frequent occasions when he was doing so, taking the piss. "Nah," she said at last. "If you'd really got a medal from the Queen, you'd have told me by now. Even you couldn't keep that a secret." He shrugged. "Suit yourself. I've got medals, though. I just don't make a big deal about them. They're in a box somewhere." "Well, maybe you can dig them out and show them to me when we get home. We've got time before the flight." Chase grinned. "I didn't say the box was here, did I?" He flicked Nina's medal, making a faint metallic ting. "I think you should wear that on the train back to New York. See if anyone recognizes you." Nina was indeed recognized on the Arcella high-speed train to Penn Station, but it wasn't because of the medal, which she had returned to its presentation case before leaving the White House. The discovery of Atlantis had not taken place under ideal conditions. The backer of Nina's expedition had ulterior, genocidal motives. So the Western nations behind the founding of the International Heritage Agency, under the auspices of the United Nations, had, in large part, set up the organization in order to devise a much more innocuous cover story. Such a story had finally been agreed upon, and a carefully staged program of media coverage arranged to reveal it to the public, with Nina, fittingly enough, at its head. As a result, she had recently been doing the publicity rounds in newspapers, magazines, and even TV, hence her being spotted by a man who asked for her autograph. "Bit more of this," said Chase as they left the train, "and you'll be in all the tabloids." "God, no! I don't want that much recognition," Nina moaned, though she had to admit being recognized by a complete stranger was a flattering, if bizarre, experience. "It's not like I'm a movie star." "You're a star to me, love," said Chase, putting a hand around her waist before casually sliding it down to...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?